843 days.
It's a number that really lands with a thud.
It really does.
Yeah.
I think we need to just sit with that for a second. Because, in the news cycle, numbers like that can just become noise.
They watch over you.
Exactly.
Oh.
But 843 days, that's, 2 years and 3 months?
And a bit, yeah.
Imagine that. It's waking up every single one of those mornings, 843 times, and the first thing you do is you grab your phone.
Before you even have coffee.
Right, before anything. And there's that knot in your stomach as you check for alerts. It's a whole country just holding its breath for an eternity.
A kind of suspended animation. I mean, think about the families who haven't had a proper night. Think about a political system, a whole society frozen in this emergency state.
And then all of a sudden, a press conference is called.
The moment everyone knew had to come eventually, but nobody really knew what it would look like.
So let's set this date. The date is January 2026. We're in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu walks up to the podium. And standing next to him is Gal Hirsch, who has been the coordinator for captives and missing persons.
And they deliver the headline that we are going to be deep diving into today. The mission, they declare, is complete.
Mission complete.
Yeah.
It has such a final ring, almost like something out of a movie.
It does, but we've got the full transcripts of the press conference, and the feeling you get from reading them,
Yeah.
it's not a celebration. Not at all. There are no ticker tape parades here.
It's much heavier than that.
So much heavier. This is a genuine watershed moment. And today, we're not just going to read you the headlines. We are going to unpack these transcripts line by line, really, to understand what complete actually signifies.
Because, yes, on the surface, the hostage crisis, the specific list of captives from October 7th, that chapter is being closed.
But underneath that, I mean, this press conference is basically a blueprint for the future. It's Netanyahu's doctrine of victory. It's a declaration of a whole new security reality for the region. And, it's the starting gun for what looks like a really vicious internal political war.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to look right past that mission complete banner and figure out what is really going on. What does this mean for the future of Gaza, for the geopolitics of 2026, and for these incredibly raw domestic battles that are raging inside Israel?
And to do that, we have to start where they started, with the person who is the center of gravity for this whole announcement, the final name on the list.
Gvilli.
Gvilli.
And just a quick note before we dive in, for anyone looking at our show notes or, reading about this online, you might see the name spelled Guelee.
Right, which looks like you'd say Gvilli or something like that.
Exactly. But the source materials we're working from, they include a very specific phonetic note. It's pronounced Gvilli. So out of respect, that's the pronunciation we're going to be using for this deep dive.
It's important. I mean, he is the symbol of how this all ended. You have to get the name right.
So Netanyahu begins his speech, and he doesn't start with policy or politics. He starts with a story. He tells the story of Gvilli's last moments on October 7th. And we have heard so many stories of heroism from that day, but the way the prime minister frames this one, it's clearly designed to paint a very specific picture.
It is. And notice who Ran was, a policeman. We hear so much about the IDF, the special forces, the soldiers, but Ran was part of the Yassam, the police special patrol unit. And the way Netanyahu describes him, he's a man who just didn't wait for orders.
Charged first and returned last. That was the phrase that really stuck out to me from the transcript.
It's an incredibly powerful epitaph, isn't it? And the details he gives are just harrowing. The transcript says Ran was wounded in the shoulder, and this was early on in the fighting near Kibbutz Alumit.
Now, just think about it. For any normal person, taking a bullet to the shoulder, that's it. Your fight is over, your combat ineffective, you look for a medic, you retreat.
But not Ran.
No.
The prime minister says he sprang into the inferno, he kept fighting, and Netanyahu is very, very specific here. He actually gives a number. He says Gvilli killed 14 terrorists.
14?
Yeah.
By himself, wounded.
It's almost unbelievable. It speaks to the sheer ferocity and chaos of that morning. He fought, Netanyahu says, until the last bullet.
And that's the tragic part. That ferocity is what led to the outcome. We need to be crystal clear here because the word return can mean a lot of things.
Yes, Gvilli was returned, but he was returned as a fallen hero.
He did not come home alive.
No. And that single fact just colors the entire event. The mission is complete because the list is clear. Everyone is accounted for. There are no more question marks hanging over these families. But the closure itself, it's a closure made of grief.
Which brings us to Gal Hirsch's part of the press conference.
Yeah.
I mean, for the last 843 days, this man has been the face of this entire effort for the family. He's the one who had to sit in those living rooms.
He's the one who had to look them in the eye.
And reading his speech, honestly, it felt like I was reading an unburdening.
Oh, absolutely. You can feel the sheer weight lifting off his shoulders, but you can also feel the scar. He talks about his tenure, 12-hour shifts, 204/7 pressure. He calls it a journey of torment.
But what's so critical for our deep dive is the math he provides. He breaks down what he calls the statistics.
And we should walk through these numbers slowly because they show you just how deep the fog of war was at the beginning of all this.
Okay, so where did he start?
He reminds everyone that on October 7th, and in the days that followed, the number of people listed as missing was 3,200.
3,200. I remember that time. It was just complete chaos. Thousands of people had just vanished. Nobody knew if they were dead in their homes, hiding in a field, or dragged into Gaza.
A total black hole of information. And Hirsch describes this painstaking process of narrowing it down, using intelligence, forensics, DNA, just sheer detective work to whittle that massive number down to the actual number of hostages.
Which was 255.
255. And now, at the end of this 843-day road, Hirsch gives the final terrible tally.
168 returned alive.
And 87 returned as fallen.
Wow, that ratio.
Yeah.
It just hits you right in the gut.
It's devastating. 87. That means roughly 1 out of every 3 hostages did not survive captivity. It is a heavy, heavy price.
And Hirsch, he's a military guy, a brigadier general, but he's also known for being quite literary. And he doesn't try to wrap this in triumphant language. There's no talk of glorious victory.
No, he reaches for poetry.
He quotes Nathan Alterman.
Around the Bonfire. It's a foundational poem in Israel from the War of Independence. Every Israeli is part of the national day.
I have lines he quoted right here. He says, "Among the great festivals of the generation, there is none more beautiful than your modest holiday." And then this part, "The nation bows and weeps."
Bows and whoops. That is the entire emotional core of his speech. He's completely reframing what victory means in this context. He's saying this isn't a party. It's not fireworks and celebration. It's a modest holiday.
A quiet, sacred, sorrowful moment.
Yes, where you acknowledge the cost. It's like a bleeding wound that's finally been stitched shut. But the scar, that scar is going to be there forever.
That imagery, the modest holiday, it's so powerful. It perfectly captures that mix of relief and profound heartbreak.
It does.
But then the microphone goes back to the prime minister. And while Netanyahu certainly acknowledges the grief, he talks about the families.
Yeah.
His tone is very different. It shifts from the cost to the promise.
And this is absolutely crucial to understanding his political narrative and, frankly, how he sees his own leadership. He recounts all those meetings he had with the families, and we all saw the news reports. Those meetings were agonizing.
Screaming, crying, accusations, just raw pain aimed right at him.
And he describes it. He says a father or mother would look him in the eye, hold up a photo of their child, and just say, promise, bring them back.
And he says he gave them his oath. I swear I will bring him back, or her back.
So by standing at that podium with Gvilli's return closing the loop, Netanyahu is closing the loop on that oath.
He's checking the final.
He is telling the entire nation, I kept my word. It took over 2 years. Brutal, painful. The whole world was screaming at me to stop, but I...
And that declaration, that I did it, that's the pivot point for the whole press conference. Because for Netanyahu, bringing the hostages home isn't just a humanitarian mission accomplished.
No, it's proof. It's validation.
It's the ultimate vindication that his strategy, and his alone, was the right one all along.
Exactly. And this is where we get into the meat of what he calls the total victory doctrine.
Total victory. Nitzakan Michlet. I mean, we've been hearing this phrase for years now. It's been on billboards. It's been a hashtag. But here, in this speech, he finally defines it. It's not just a slogan. It's a structure. It has 3 pillars.
Right. And giving it a structure is important because victory against a group like Hamas is usually so it's hard to define. Netanyahu tries to make it concrete. So, pillar 1.
The return of all hostages.
Check. As of the return of Gvilli, that pillar is marked as complete.
So pillar 1 is done. What's pillar 2?
Pillar 2, dismantling Hamas's weapons capabilities.
So destroying the rockets, the workshops, the tunnels where they're built, all of that.
All of the hardware. And then pillar 3, the demilitarization of Gaza.
So his argument is pillar 1 is in the bag. 2 and 3 are the work in progress. But what I found so striking was how much of this speech, this moment that's supposed to be about national unity and closure, was spent pushing back at his critics.
He calls them background noise.
Just think about that phrase, background. I mean, who is he talking? He's talking about millions of Israelis who were protesting in the streets. He's talking about foreign leaders, presidents, prime ministers. He's talking about former generals, opposition politicians.
But he dismisses it all as static noise.
And he lists their argument one by one. It's like he kept a list. He says, they told me we will never see a single hostage. They told me we must stop the war. They told me we must accept Hamas's demand.
He's reciting the arguments of his opponents from the last 2 years just so he can spike the football on.
It's a massive, I told you.
The biggest. His counter-argument is brutally simple. If I had listened to background noise, if I had stopped the war when you demand, if I'd caved to international pressure, then Gvilli and the 86 other fallen hostages would still be in Gaza, and the 168 who came home alive.
He frames himself as the lone statesman, the one man standing against the war. He says it explicitly in the transcript. I stood alone against pressure from home and abroad.
It is the ultimate vindication narrative. He's looking at the Israeli public and saying, screamed at me, you doubted me, you blocked highways, but my method, this combination of relentless military pressure and tough diplomacy, was the only thing that worked. And here's the proof.
And because he feels so vindicated on his method, he feels completely empowered to dictate what comes next. He then drops a phrase in this speech that is going to be incredibly controversial. He says Israel will now control the entire area from Jordan to the sea.
Yes, and we need to pause on that because normally the phrase is from the river to the sea, and it's used by Palestinian activists to call for a state that would eliminate.
He flips it completely.
He flips it, he co-opts it. He is declaring that from now on, Israel will maintain overarching security control over every square inch of land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean.
Which, just to be clear, explicitly includes the Gaza Strip.
Explicitly and permanently. He is slamming the door on any and all alternative. He says no to a Palestinian state, not now, not ever. He says no to a Hamastan, obviously, but then he adds no to a Fatistan.
Fatistan. That's a direct shot at the Palestinian Authority, at Mahmoud Abbas's Fatah party.
It's the final nail in the coffin for the two-state solution from his perspective. There was so much talk, especially from the Americans early in the war, about having a revitalized PA come in and take over Gaza after Hamas was gone.
Right, the idea that they would sort of ride in on the back of Israeli tanks and take over the administration.
Yeah, not over. That idea is dead.
Mm-hmm.
He's making it clear that for the foreseeable future, there's no power vacuum in Gaza. There's only Israeli security control.
Which is a huge statement. And you can't really make a statement like that, controlling everything from Jordan to the sea, without having some serious international backing.
Well, you can't unless your main ally is on board. And this is where the timeline of January 2026 becomes so critical.
Because there's a name that comes up again and again in these transcripts.
President Trump.
And it's always in the present tense.
Yes. In this timeline, Donald Trump is back in the White House. And both Netanyahu and Gal Hirsch make a point to thank him repeatedly. But it's not just a general thing. They name names.
Steve Witkoff.
Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner is back. It feels like a time warp to 2020.
It really does. And then Roger Carstens, Adam Bowler. These are all figures from that same circle.
What this signals is a complete return to the Abraham Accords style of diplomacy. You know, it's very transactional, it's focused on state-to-state normalization, and it almost completely bypasses the traditional Palestinian leadership.
Netanyahu even mentions that he and President Trump were in total agreement on the goals of demilitarizing Gaza. It sounds like there's absolutely zero daylight between the Israeli government and this new U.S. administration.
Which, of course, emboldens Netanyahu to take a much harder line with everyone else in the region. If you know the White House has your back, you can afford to be tough. For sure. I mean, look at how he talks about the idea of international peacekeepers in Gaza.
Oh, he just shuts it down completely. For years, people have been debating the day after, who provides security? Is it a UN force, an Arab coalition?
There was talk about maybe Turkey sending troops.
And Netanyahu just scoffs at that. The transcript has him saying, I hear we will bring in Turkish soldiers. That will not happen. Full stop.
He clearly sees them as hostile.
Hostile, or at least compromise. He's not going to outsource Israel's security to any country he views as sympathetic to the Muslim Brotherhood or Hamas, which includes Turkey and Qatar.
Qatar. This part was fascinating to me. I mean, for 2 years, Qatar was the indispensable mediator. They hosted the talks, they passed the messages, they were the channel.
They were the address for everything.
And in this press conference, Netanyahu basically admits he was playing a double game with them the entire time.
It's a moment of stunning candor, really. He says he attacked Qatar both verbally and, quote, on the ground throughout the war.
What does on the ground even mean? Is he talking about military action, intelligence operation?
It's deliberately ambiguous. But on the ground definitely implies some kind of kinetic or operational pressure. Maybe targeting Qatari-funded assets, maybe disrupting their interests in other places. He admits he got a lot of criticism for it.
Right. He says people were telling him, don't do that. Qatar is a great friend. They're the mediator.
And he's essentially saying now, you are all naive. He's framing it as, I didn't get the hostages back by being nice to Qatar. I got them back by putting a gun to Qatar's head. Metaphoric. He treated them as an adversary whose arm needed to...
It's a very cynical view of diplomacy.
It's a very realpolitik view of diplomacy.
Then there's the question about Saudi Arabia. A reporter asks if he's worried that Saudi is now pivoting more towards an alliance with Turkey and Qatar away from Israel.
And Netanyahu's answer is so confident, it's not desperate at all. He says, sure, I'm still open to normalization, I'm still peace, but there are conditions.
He says it depends on Saudi Arabia not aligning with ideologies that delegitimize Israel.
He's setting the terms. He's not the one begging for a deal anymore. He's saying, if you want peace with the new, stronger Israel, this is the price of it. You have to break with the anti...
It really seems like this total victory doctrine applies to everything. Diplomacy, regional politics, everything. It's peace through undeniable strength, not through
Absolutely. And you see that in the small details, too.
Okay.
Like the Rafah crossing.
The border with Egypt, the only way out of Gaza that isn't into Israel, it's always been a huge point of contention.
Always. And Netanyahu just mocks the idea of letting the Palestinian Authority manage. He says something like, what are they going to do? Just stamp a visa? He's so dismissive of any kind of symbolic power.
He's only interested in actual hard power.
Exactly. He clarifies that the crossing will remain open for people to pass through, but in limited numbers, and this is the key, only with Israel checks.
So even on the border with Egypt, Israel holds all the keys.
Israel has the biometric scanners, Israel has the database, and Israel has the final veto on every single person who walks. It's a model of total security encirclement.
Okay, so let's recap where we are. We have the hostage mission declared complete. We have a military victory declared. We have a geopolitical alignment with a Trump administration that seems rock solid. You would think the prime minister would be on top of the world.
You would think.
But then the press conference takes a very sharp and very ugly turn.
It really does. The formal statements end and the Q&A with the Israeli press.
And suddenly we are not talking about national heroes or grand strategy anymore. We're talking about leaks, criminal investigations, and what Netanyahu repeatedly calls a witch hunt.
This is where that deep, raw domestic fissure in Israeli society cracks wide. You can literally feel the temperature in the room plummet just by reading the transcript. It goes from a historic national address to a dirty political brawl in the space of about 3 seconds.
So let's get into the specifics, because these scandals are clearly what's dominating the Israeli news cycle in this 2026 timeline. A reporter brings up two of his closest aides, Jonathan Urich and Sachi Braverman.
Right. Let's start with Jonathan Urich. He's one of Netanyahu's key media guys, been with him forever. And the accusation that the reporter throws out is that he was secretly receiving money from Qatar, or at least had some kind of conflicting interest related to Qatar while advising the prime minister.
Which, given everything we just heard Netanyahu say about his own tough stance on Qatar, that's an explosive charge.
It's dynamite. And Netanyahu's defense is, well, it's colorful. He quotes a judge from the case who apparently said there are camels flying in the air.
Camels flying in the air. I love that. It's such a perfectly dismissive idiom.
It's the Israeli equivalent of when pigs fly. It means it's an absurd, baseless famine. Netanyahu's argument is basically, how could my aide possibly be on the Qatari payroll when I was the one attacking Qatar the whole time? It makes no sense. He claims Urich never even spoke to him about Qatar.
Okay, so that's Urich. Then there's the other aide, Sachi Braverman. And this one sounds even darker. The allegations involve blackmail, secret recordings, digging into people's phone records.
The so-called blackmail scandal, the subtext, the really ugly insinuation, is that people in the prime minister's office were trying to dig up dirt on senior military officers or their families.
To what end? To keep them in line? To ensure loyalty?
To control the narrative, to stop them from speaking out or cooperating with investigators. That's the allegation.
And how does Netanyahu respond to that?
He just explodes. He defends Braverman with credible ferocity, calls the story a giant fake, a hunting expedition.
He says, and this is a direct quote, they want to ruin his family to get something on. He makes it intensely personal.
He does. And this all feeds into his much broader, overarching critique of the Israeli media and the entire legal establishment. He makes this incredible claim that he cannot get a fair hearing in his own country. He actually praises the foreign media in comparison.
Which is pretty ironic, given how often he's been criticized by the foreign press.
It's hugely ironic, but his argument is nuanced. He says foreign journalists ask him tough questions about policy, about the war, about Iran, about diplomacy, but he feels the Israeli media isn't interested in politics. They're just engaged in a personal, vindictive campaign of character assassination. He says, here, they just want to catch a head, their head.
And this deep-seated hostility towards Israel's own domestic institutions, the press, the judiciary, it all leads directly to the biggest fight of all.
The absolute elephant in the room.
The Commission of Inquiry.
Right. October 7th happened. It was the biggest intelligence and security failure in the nation's history. Everybody agrees there has to be a full investigation. The billion-dollar question is, what kind of investigation?
And the battle lines are drawn between two models. On one side, you have what's called a state commission of inquiry, and on the other, you have what Netanyahu is pushing for, which he calls the 911 model.
And we really need to explain the difference here because it might sound like a dry, bureaucratic distinction. But in Israel, this is everything. It's the difference between a political earthquake and a minor tremor.
Okay, so break it down for us. What is a state commission of inquiry?
A state commission of inquiry in Hebrew, Avadat Chekira Mamlaktet, is the absolute gold standard for investigations. It is fiercely independent. It's led by the judiciary, almost always a sitting or retired Supreme Court justice. The judge, not the politician, appoints the other member. They have full subpoena power. And historically, they have very, very sharp.
This is what happened after the Yom Kippur War in 1973.
Precise. The Agranat. That commission ended careers. It sent generals and government ministers packing. Netanyahu knows this history inside and out. He knows that a state commission led by an independent judiciary he doesn't trust poses a mortal threat to his legacy and possibly his political survival.
So he proposes his alternative, the 911 model.
And he frames it so cleverly. He says, look at America. They suffered a terrible disaster on 9/11. Did they appoint judges to investigate? No. They appointed 5 Republicans.
He wants politicians investigating other politicians.
He argues that the American model was bipartisan, and it produced a unified report that focused on lessons learned for the future rather than on a witch hunt for individual blame. He paints the judicial inquiry model as a political hatchet job just waiting to happen, led by his enemy.
But the reporters in the room, they push back on hard. They point out that all the security, the head of the army, Herzi Halevi, the head of the Shin Bet, Ronan Bar, they've already started testifying to the state controller. They are cooperating with the existing oversight bodies.
And this is a truly stunning moment in the transcript. Netanyahu basically throws his entire security establishment under the bus. He claims they didn't really cooperate. He says, oh, they showed up, but they refused to discuss the core.
He says, on the other hand, I answered a massive questionnaire. I provided documents.
He positions himself as the only one who is truly being transparent, the only one willing to open the book. If, and it's a huge if, the investigation is done in the format that
It's a masterclass in political maneuvering. He's taking the universal demand for an investigation and trying to design it in such a way that the outcome is political, which he believes he can manage, rather than judicial, which he knows he can't.
And he justifies all of this with a very heavy philosophical argument. At one point he says, the rule of law should serve life, not the other way around.
Wow. The rule of law should serve life. That is a loaded statement.
It is. On the surface, he's saying, let's not get so caught up in legal purism and procedure that we paralyze the state and prevent it from defending itself. He's arguing that if the system is too rigid.
But his opponents, they're hearing something completely different. They're hearing the rule of law shouldn't apply to the ruler.
That is the fundamental conflict. It's the tension between the mission is complete and the investigation has only just begun. And it shows that even if the war against Hamas is winding down, the war over the narrative, the war for the soul of Israeli democracy, that's just...
So after all that political fighting, the press conference does zoom out a bit. Netanyahu gets into this more philosophical space, talking about the nature of Jewish history.
Yeah, this came up when he was asked about a recent conference on anti-Semitism. And he offers this theory that he has about, he calls the theory of
conspicuousness. Break that down for us.
He argues that historically, throughout the diaspora, Jews were always conspicuous, but...
So visible enough to be noticed and hated, but too powerless to do anything about it.
Exactly. They stood out. They were different culturally, religiously. And he says that specific combination, being highly visible and highly vulnerable, is what invited attacks. It invited jealousy, the blood libels, the pogroms.
And his point is that today, in the 21st century, the first part of that equation, the conspicuous part, hasn't changed at all.
No. Israel is probably the most conspicuous, most scrutinized nation on earth. And he says the slanders are the same, just updated. He talks about accusations of genocide, of deliberately killing children. He calls these the modern-day blood libel. So the hatred in his is a constant. It never changed.
But the variable that has changed is the second week.
Now we are strong. That's his core thesis. Now we fight back. He is framing this entire 2-year war not just as a security operation, but as the fundamental correct 2,000 years. The ability to return fire is, for him, the antidote to millennia of victory.
It's a very stark worldview. It's one where conflict is seen as inevitable, but defeat is now optional.
That's a perfect way to put it. He says anti-Semitism hasn't changed, but the Jewish ability to respond has.
And that ability to respond, he makes it clear, is now directed squarely at the head of the snake, at Iran. He admits the Iranian axis is already trying to rehabilitate itself after the blows it took.
He acknowledges they've damaged Iran's proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah, significantly. But he's not naive. He knows they're not gone. And so he issues this warning, which is pretty standard rhetoric, but still chilling. He says if Iran attacks Israel direct, the response will be something they have not yet.
It feels like this perpetual state of conflict. You beat Hamas in Gaza, you immediately have to turn and warn Iran. You secure the southern border, you have to worry about the northern.
That is the reality of the total victory doctrine. It isn't a victory where you can finally put your sword down and go home to farm your land. It's a victory where you have to keep your sword permanently sharpened and stay on the castle wall forever.
Which brings us back to the practicality. If Israel is staying on that wall, if they are maintaining security control from Jordan to the sea, then who is actually running daily life in Gaza? Who's in charge of the school? Who makes sure the water pumps work? Who collects the garbage?
That is the million-dollar question. This is where the grand ideology crashes into the messy reality of government. And Netanyahu admits it's really, he uses the word sieving. He says they are sieving the population.
Sieving, like putting them through a strainer.
Exact. Filtering them. He points out, correctly, that for decades, if you were an educated professional in Gaza, you pretty much had two potential employers, the Palestinian Authority or Hamas.
Right. If you were a water engineer or a school principal or a municipal clerk, your paycheck was signed by one of those two groups.
So if your policy is now to ban Hamas and to ban the PA, who is left? Who is qualified to run any?
Netanyahu says the Shin Bet, the Internal Security Service, is trying to find unaffiliated local admin.
He talks about going person by person, vetting them, trying to find professionals who aren't ideologically tainted.
But is that even realistic? I mean, can you find an entire professional class in a place like Gaza that has zero connection to the previous regime?
He admits it's incredibly hard, but he insists. And that shows you how deeply committed he is to this new security order. He would rather engage in the slow, painstaking, maybe impossible task of building a new civil administration, one person at a time, than hand the keys back to the Palestinian Authority. He will not revert to the old Oslo model.
It sounds like a bureaucratic and security nightmare that could last for years.
It is, but in his worldview, that's the necessary price of total security.
So as we start to wrap this up, what are we really left with? We started with that number, 843 days. We end with the phrase mission complete, but what's the actual takeaway here?
I think we're left with a massive paradox.
Go on.
On the one hand, there's a very real sense of closure. Gvilli is home. The list of hostages is finally tragic, and that is a monumental achievement that a lot of people said would never happen. For those families, it is a promise kept.
But on the other hand,
there's absolutely no sense of, there's just security control. There's this sieving of a population. There are open-ended threats to Iran. And most importantly, internally, there is the beginning of this vicious political war over who is to blame for October 7th.
So it's the end of the hostage mission, but it's really just the beginning of the national reckoning.
That's it, exact. External mission is over. The internal mission, the fight over guilt, responsibility, and the future of the country's democratic institutions, that is just getting started.
And that last thought from Netanyahu, the one about the rule of law and needing to serve life, that really stays with, because if a country can't even agree on the basic rules of the game, on how to investigate a catastrophe, on who is a journalist and who is a headhunter, on what is justice and what is a witch hunt, and that total victory starts to feel a little hollow, doesn't it?
It feels like a fortress built on shifting sand. The walls might look strong, but the ground underneath is starting to give way.
A modest holiday indeed. The nation bows and it weeps, and then it starts to argue.
And it prepares for the next round.
That's all the time we have for this deep dive. We will be watching very closely to see how this 9/11 model debate unfolds and whether this sieving process in Gaza can actually produce a functioning administration on it. This story is very far.
It certainly is.
Thanks for listening. Stay curious, and we will see you next time.